Hi guys. Today we will be starting Unit 8 and it's all about photosynthesis. Today we will be delving into Section 8.1 to learn a little more about what really happens during photosynthesis. This section will be about the plants themselves and how their biological makeup allows for photosynthesis to occur. So first off, let's talk about the structure of plants. In order for plants to undergo photosynthesis, they need to have all of the right components in all the right places. This means that we need the enzymes to help catalyze the chemical reactions, chlorophyll to capture solar energy, and we'll talk about chlorophyll a little later, and just the right configuration of space and working systems inside of the photosynthetic cell. With the way plant cells are organized, the chemical reactions occur very smoothly and effectively. Chloroplasts, which are a specific kind of photosynthetic cell, are going to be our main focus here in this unit on photosynthesis. Just like the mitochondria, they're evidence of symbiogenesis in that they have evolved from photosynthetic bacteria and have existed within plant cells since. So, thanks to our friend chlorophyll, photosynthesis can occur in all parts of a plant covered in green, where solar energy can be attained. That said, the leaves of the plants are the major sites of photosynthesis. In fact, there are about 500,000 chloroplasts in a millimeter-sized chunk of leaf. Mesophyll cells are where you'll usually find these chloroplasts, generally chilling between the upper and lower layers of tissue. They typically hold around 30 to 40 chloroplasts, each about 3 by 5 micrometers in size. Plants need carbon dioxide to help fuel the photosynthetic reactions. They also need to expel the oxygen that is created in the process. This is all made possible by the stomata, which are microscopic pores that facilitate gas exchange between the inside of a plant and outside world. Fun fact, stomata came from the Greek word stoma, which means mouth. If the plant needs water or sugar for photosynthesis, the xylem and phloem in the roots and veins can help with transportation. Now, let's take a look inside the chloroplasts themselves. Once we're inside, the first thing we see is a double membrane structure that envelops a dense fluid known as the stroma. The stroma has ribosomes and DNA and plays a very important role in photosynthesis. Within the stroma is a third membrane system, housing many sacs known as thylakoids. These are the little green Mentos-shaped pieces that you can see inside the chloroplast, and their main purpose is to convert light energy into chemical energy. They tend to stack on top of one another, and these stacks are referred to as grana. So here are some pictures to help you visualize everything I just mentioned. So zooming into these leaves right here, we have the stomata that allows gas to pass through the epidermis, and then the middle layer, the mesophyll, houses the chloroplasts. Inside the chloroplast, there are two layers of membrane, with the grana, or stacks of thylakoids, inside. The stroma is all over the place. As you can see here, the mesophyll cell is around a 50 by 50 micrometer size, which makes sense considering that they hold about 30 to 40 chloroplasts. That's more than enough space. And this is just another perspective view of the chloroplast. And leaves. So, let's talk about what's really going on regarding the chemical aspect of photosynthesis. Even after all these years, we still don't completely understand the process. After all, it's not like we have any experience doing it ourselves. However, we can simply describe the process with this equation right here. This basically summarizes what happens. Some important things to note here. Photosynthesis doesn't directly produce glucose. It actually produces a 3-carbon sugar that is used to produce glucose. We also start off with 12 waters and end up with 6. But these numbers are specifically written here rather than just canceling them off of each other because we actually begin the process with 12 water molecules, we use them all up, and then we end up with 6 newly formed water molecules. It was discovered some time ago that the oxygen gas that plants expel came from water rather than the carbon dioxide. Scientists used to believe that the carbon dioxide was split into oxygen and carbon, and then the carbon was joined by water to form a basic carbohydrate. What really happens is that the chloroplast splits the water into its two components, hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen gets taken and used with the sugar molecules, while the oxygen was made into oxygen gas and was released as a byproduct. So as you can see here, the oxygen from water is what forms the oxygen waste. That's in the blue. And just like with cellular respiration, photosynthesis uses redox reactions. However, instead of releasing energy from sugar and having the electrons move down the electron transport chain into the final oxygen acceptor, the electrons that come from the water splitting are transferred to carbon dioxide, becoming a part of new sugar. The energy required to do this comes from light. And since we like using our fancy terms so much, we can say that cellular respiration's reaction is exergonic, while photosynthesis's reaction is endergonic. And as you can see here, the oxygen goes to become oxygen waste while the hydrogen joins the carbon dioxide as sugar. Alright, so I guess that's all there is to photosynthesis, right? We're done. It's such a simple process, isn't it? Nope. There are actually two stages of photosynthesis: the light reactions and the light independent reactions, which are known as the Calvin cycle. So before we get into these quote unquote dark reactions, let's do a recap on what happens in the light reactions. Our main objective overall for light reactions is to convert the energy we get from the sun into chemical energy that we can use to get our sugar. So first we have the water splitting, which gives off electrons and hydrogen ions and releases oxygen gas. The light that the chlorophyll absorbs is used as energy to transfer these protons and electrons to NADP+, an electron acceptor that can store energized electrons to be used later in the Calvin cycle. Notice how this is very similar to NAD+, and that is because they're essentially the same thing. The P in NADP+ is a phosphate group. The NADP+ is then reduced to NADPH by adding 2 electrons and an H+ ion. And then we have a familiar face here, chemiosmosis, which adds a phosphate group to ADP, a process known as photophosphorylation. Naturally, this ends up leaving us with a little bit of ATP. So now we delve deeper into the Calvin cycle with our two chemical energy tools, ATP and NADPH. They differ slightly in the sense that NADPH holds electrons that can be passed down onto an electron acceptor, reducing it, whereas ATP is our more standard unit of energy. So a little bit of history. It was Melvin Calvin who identified the steps of the Calvin cycle around the late 1940s, which is why it's now called the Calvin cycle. The entirety of the Calvin cycle takes place in the stroma, so remember that fluidy stuff? The Calvin cycle essentially takes carbon dioxide in the air and with ATP and NADPH tries to make sugar. To start, the CO2 in the air undergoes a process known as carbon fixation and is incorporated into organic molecules. Using our handy-dandy NADPH, the fixed carbon is reduced to carbohydrate. It also uses the ATP it got from the light reactions to help form the carbohydrates. So here's an animation.
Plants provide us with food to eat and oxygen to breathe. They perform this amazing feat by the process of photosynthesis. Let's take a closer look. Photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide, which diffuses into the leaf through small pores, and then enters the cells. Inside the cell, carbon dioxide diffuses into the chloroplasts, where photosynthesis takes place. Chloroplasts use energy from light to transform carbon dioxide and water into sugar and oxygen. Zooming into a chloroplast, we see these flattened membranous sacs called thylakoids. Here, light energy is converted to chemical energy in the first phase of photosynthesis, the light reactions. The two green structures you see here are photosystems, large complexes of proteins and chlorophyll that capture light energy. An electron transport chain connects the two photosystems. Notice the small mobile electron carriers that shuttle electrons from one large complex to another. Now let's take a closer look at the steps of the light reactions. The photosystem on the left absorbs light energy, exciting electrons that enter the electron transport chain. Electrons are replaced with electrons stripped from water, creating oxygen as a byproduct. The energized electrons flow down the electron transport chain, releasing energy that is used to pump hydrogen ions, the blue balls, into the thylakoid. In the photosystem on the right, light energy excites electrons, and this time the electrons are captured by an electron carrier molecule, NADPH. The high concentration of hydrogen ions inside the thylakoid powers ATP synthase, producing ATPs. The light reactions in the thylakoid have produced two energy products, ATP and NADPH, that will now power the production of sugar in the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle takes place outside the thylakoids in the stroma, the thick fluid of the chloroplast. At the beginning of the cycle, carbon dioxide molecules combine with molecules called RUBP. The resulting molecules go through a series of reactions powered by ATP and NADPH from the light reactions. Sugar molecules known as G3Ps are produced. Most of the G3Ps are rearranged back into RUBPs that will begin the Calvin cycle again. But the important product of photosynthesis is the remaining G3P sugar. Some G3Ps are used to build glucose, which can combine into starch or cellulose. Still other G3Ps form sucrose. And some of the sugar is broken down by cellular respiration using oxygen in the plant's own mitochondria, generating ATPs that can power other work of the plant. Excess oxygen diffuses out of the leaf through the pores, while more carbon dioxide enters. With three simple ingredients, carbon dioxide, water, and light, plants produce sugar and oxygen by photosynthesis, powering plant metabolism and ultimately providing your fuel as well.
Well, why thank you, robotic lady voice. Not only did you rudely interrupt me, but you also just repeated everything I said. And then some. We're not even supposed to talk about that yet, right? Anyways, so here are some more visuals. We have the water coming in being split, and then joined by light to form NADP+. Chemiosmosis is also going on, adding a phosphate group to ADP. Next, the NADP+ gets reduced to NADPH, and photophosphorylation blesses us with ATP. And then finally, we have the Calvin cycle, of which we aren't supposed to be going into full detail yet, but for now, we are saying that it takes CO2 and reduces it to our final product of sugar. And that's it, guys. Stay tuned for the next section on light. Thanks for watching.